Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to Zek'voz in Uldir.
Yes, this three-phase fight is pretty tricky when it comes to positioning, as you need to quickly react to a bunch of different debuffs and spells whilst fighting adds and dodging the large explosions. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump straight into it.
Now in each of the different phases the boss does have unique abilities, however he does have 3 abilities that he'll use in all phases. For the tanks to deal with is the Might of the Void 3-hit combo. The combo starts with a Void Lash, which is a frontal cone which deals damage, and reduces the healing that you take by 50% for 8 seconds, or 25% on normal mode. This is followed up by Shatter, which is a single target physical damage hit on the tank, which leaves another debuff which increases the physical damage you take by 50% for 40 seconds, and lastly the combo is finished with yet again another Void Lash. Now there are 2 different ways the tanks can deal with this. You can have a single tank take the entire combo, just using large cooldowns, making sure that they are still healthy when the last Void Lash comes down, as they will now be immune to all healing for 8 seconds if you're doing it on heroic difficulty. Alternatively, the overall preferred way of doing it is to simply taunt after the Shatter has gone through, leaving both tanks with a single stack of the Void Lash debuff for a short time, but at least you can heal them. You can then just alternate who takes the Shatter for each combo. Just keep in mind, regardless of how you decide to deal with this ability, this combo is a cone, so make sure you're facing the boss away from the raid. For healers to note is that random groups of players will take small bursts of damage from the broken Titan discs at the side of the room. There's no way of avoiding this damage, you just got to make sure that you keep people topped up throughout the fight. And lastly to mention for the entire raid to deal with is the Surging Darkness, and this is arguably the thing that makes the fight most difficult. At 100% energy, the boss will start a series of 3 explosions which are placed on the ground in circular patterns. Each explosion will do a small amount of damage to the raid, but will do a lethal amount of damage to anyone that stands within the purple zones. All you need to do is simply just move into the clear area to avoid taking this extra damage. However, this area does change 2 times over the course of the ability. The clear area will either be right in the middle, a ring around that central area, or an even larger ring around that. And do note that each time this ability is cast, it will always be in a randomized order. When dancing between these spaces, it's best that you keep the raid stacked up the entire time. This is primarily for healing, but it also makes it a lot easier for tanks just to position the boss so they don't hit the entire raid with Void Lash. There are, however, a lot of other abilities that will overlap at the exact same time this is going on, that we'll talk about in a moment. Now during phase 1 you'll have to deal with Cthulhu's Eye, which will occasionally appear at the end of the room and will target people with Eye Beam. This marks them, placing an arrow above their head and a circle around their character. After a couple of seconds, that player will then take a burst of damage, which will then try to spread to anyone within their targeting circle. Each time this damage bounces, it does more and more to the point that it will eventually one-shot people. So as soon as the eye appears, you want your entire raid, including melee, to spread out as much as possible, and the moment you're targeted, make sure no one else is within your circle. Also in this phase on a timer, 6 bug adds will spawn and will fixate on random players. When they reach them, they apply a stackable dot, which also slows movement speed. You'll want to focus these adds down as soon as possible. These adds always spawn in the exact same location, so the boss should be positioned in the path that the adds take towards the raid to act as some sort of focal point for everyone to use crowd control and AoE them off quickly. Now it's likely on a first kill that you will see the adds spawn some point during a Surging Darkness. It's best that you try and group them up as soon as possible and just use crowd control to keep them at bay whilst you deal with all the explosions before finishing them off after all the blasts have ended.
Now when the boss reaches 65% health, he'll enter phase 2. 3 Void Weaver adds will spawn in a triangular formation in the middle of the room. These adds spam cast Void Bolt onto random players, dealing a pretty nasty burst of damage. You just want to make sure that you assign interrupt to all of these whilst you just kill them off as soon as possible. On normal mode you can actually group these adds up using grips and knockbacks just to kill them off quicker. However on heroic they are rooted to the spot and cannot be moved. If you struggle getting all of the kicks off, you can hard crowd control 1 or 2 of the adds and kill them off one by one. This is far safer, and as long as you focus your damage into them, you will easily kill them all off before a new set spawns. Now during this time, you should ideally move the boss next to the adds for cleave damage, but only if it's safe to do so. Also during this phase, Roiling Deceit debuffs will be placed on random players in the raid. These deal damage and spawn a cloud on the ground once the debuff expires. If a player runs into this cloud, they will spawn a Guardian of Yogg-Saron, which needs to be picked up by the tank. When this ad dies or is alive for too long, it will explode, dealing a huge burst of damage to the entire raid. You want to avoid spawning any of these ads at all costs, mainly by just placing the Roiling Deceit debuffs in low traffic areas, such as the far ends or sides of the room. This is generally easy to do, except when the debuffs expire during a Surging Darkness. We set up a simple rule for this. The entire raid should be stacked up and moving around as a single unit, whilst any debuff players that need to drop off their clouds move to the opposite end of whatever safe space you're in. That way, no one's going to be near your clouds and you're not going to spawn any ads. However, if you do mess up and spawn an ad, don't panic. Just pick it up and get ready to use personal and healing cooldowns to survive the hit when it explodes.
When the boss reaches 30% health, phase 3 begins. An Orb of Corruption will begin to fall from the sky towards a marked location. When it hits the ground, it deals ever-increasing bursts of damage to the entire group, quickly leading to a wipe. A player needs to soak the orb as it hits the ground, and doing so will send it back up into the air and move forward around 15 to 20 yards in the direction the player was facing. The orb will then begin to fall again, forcing the raid to constantly keep the orb airborne throughout the entire phase. The person catching the orb should always try and face towards a group of players, generally with melee players facing it towards range, and vice versa. When you soak the orb, you gain a 30-second debuff, which increases your healing and damage output by 100%. Once this debuff expires, you will however become mind-controlled and spam cast Psionic Blast at random people in the raid, just fearing them around all over the place. So it's important that raid members interrupt this cast while they burst you down to 50% health to break the mind control. However, this mind control effect is far more powerful and heroic. Not only is it not broken until the player is dead, but also when you do become mind controlled, you will AoE fear all players within 8 yards of you. So you need to make sure as soon as your debuff is about to run out, you move out of the raid. The moment you are mind controlled, the group can then swap to you and use things like grips just to get you into melee and nuke you down. Alternatively, people can just use hard crowd control on you instead and just leave you alone until the fight is over. Now, this Orb of Corruption will be active during the Surging Darkness. We recommend that you assign a few immunities for this time so that they can soak the orb even if it's within an explosion zone. But mechanically for this encounter, that's all it is. You just want to make sure that you save Bloodlust and nuke down the boss before the entire raid becomes overwhelmed with orbs and runs out of players due to the mind control.
Now, if you want more information about this boss in a written format with clear raid positioning maps, spell tooltips, loot and achievement information and a whole lot more, then check out our guide over on Wowhead. A link can be found in the description below. Thank you so much to Discord for sponsoring this guide series. They've been working on new features for their in-game overlay. Not only can you see others in the voice channel you're in, but you can now see and type in text channels as well. This means that you'll never have to tab out to read all the breaking news via the Wowhead news bot, or see all the gossip in your guild channels, or for what we find most useful, being able to read up on some reminders on our own dedicated Uldir boss channels that you can find on our Discord, and you can find a link to that in the description below. Setting this up is really easy. Just go into settings, games, make sure the overlay is enabled for the game that you're playing, go into overlay settings, enable the overlay and set a keybind, and that's it. Another feature that they're working on is the ability to actually pin text channels to the game that you're playing, so you can keep chatting with your friends without ever needing to actually interrupt your gameplay. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are absolutely amazing and we really do appreciate all of the support, so thank you so much. And lastly, thank you all for watching and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.